My dad's text arrived 3 hours before the party. Don't come to your sister's engagement, you don't fit the image. He thought I was just a disappointment. A daughter who disappeared into the military 8 years ago while my sister married into wealth. So, I turned my car around and headed straight back to Washington. But at 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was my sister, crying so hard she could barely breathe. How could you do this to our family? Dad saw the live broadcast. He saw who you really are. Before I could answer, the news on the television behind me broke into a national address. There was my face, my full name, and a silver medal pinned to my dress uniform by the president himself. They thought they were hiding the shame of the family. They didn't realize America was about to find out who I really was. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and for the last 8 years, my family treated me like a ghost. To my father, Richard, image was everything. My younger sister, Chloe, was the golden child, the polished, perfect daughter marrying into one of California's most powerful real estate dynasties. Then there was me, the black sheep who walked away from the family business to join the military. I was sitting in my modest rental car in front of my father's gated estate, wearing a simple navy dress, ready to put the past behind me for Chloe's big night. My hand was on the door handle when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. Don't come inside. The guest list is already set. You don't fit the image. Before I could even process the words, the heavy front door opened. Dad stepped out onto the porch, adjusting his designer cufflinks. He didn't even walk down the steps. He just looked at my car, pointed toward the gate, and mouthed 3 words. Go back home. He thought my simple presence would embarrass him in front of his new, ultra-wealthy in-laws. He thought I was just a low-ranking disappointment scrambling to make ends meet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just pulled out of the driveway, turned my car around, and headed straight back toward Washington, D.C. What my father didn't know was that I wasn't hiding a life of failure. I was hiding a secret that was about to blow his world apart. To understand why my father locked me out of that house, you have to understand how the Carter family operates. My father didn't raise children. He raised assets. 8 years ago, when I turned 21, Dad handed me a pre-planned contract for a corner office at his firm. He expected me to fall in line, wear the designer suits, and spend my life making rich men richer. But I wanted a life that actually meant something. So, 2 weeks later, I walked into a recruitment office and enlisted. To my father, that was the ultimate betrayal. Joining the military wasn't honorable to him. It was a public embarrassment. It meant he couldn't control me. So, he erased me. Whenever relatives asked where his eldest daughter was, he'd lie with a dismissive wave of his hand, telling them I was traveling abroad to find myself. While my sister Chloe was being groomed for country club lunches and social media perfection, I was putting myself through the most grueling training of my life. I transferred into elite military intelligence, working 18-hour days in windowless command centers, analyzing high-stakes global threats, and rising through the ranks in complete silence. I couldn't talk about my work. I couldn't post my achievements online. While Chloe was buying $10,000 dresses for her high society engagement, I was leading covert operations attached to the highest levels of government. My father thought I was a broke, lost soul driving a cheap rental car because I had nothing to show for my life. He genuinely believed that shielding his new, ultra-wealthy in-laws from my presence was protecting his precious family legacy. He had no idea that while he was desperate to impress a room full of local elites, his disappointment of a daughter was answering directly to the Pentagon. As I drove down the dark highway back toward Washington, the engagement party 40 miles behind me was in full swing. The grand ballroom of the Pine Valley Country Club was decorated in ivory white and gold. My father, Richard, stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of vintage champagne, surrounded by the elite of the city. He was in his absolute element, practically glowing with pride as he introduced Chloe to her fiancé's family, the Sterling dynasty. "Family is everything to us," my father announced to a circle of wealthy investors, leaning in with his signature salesman charm. "I've built my entire life on tradition, loyalty, and excellence. My daughters reflect those exact values." He toasted to Chloe's bright future, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd banished his eldest daughter to the parking lot less than an hour ago. To him, the night was going perfectly. Then, at precisely 8:45, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. The large high-definition screens around the room, which had been playing a slideshow of Chloe and her fiancé, suddenly cut to a blank black display. A sharp, urgent chime rang through the audio system, silencing the music and the laughter. Across the country, every major television network broke away from their scheduled programming for an emergency broadcast originating straight from the West Wing. Guests turned toward the screens, whispers rippling through the crowd as the news anchor's grave voice filled the venue. "We interrupt this program for a live special address from the President of the United States." My father smiled smoothly, taking a sip of his drink, assuming it was just a political speech. He had no clue that in less than 60 seconds, his entire world was going to shatter. The room went dead quiet as the presidential seal appeared on every screen across the ballroom. The president stepped behind the lectern in the White House briefing room, his expression serious. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice echoing through the country club's speakers, "tonight, we honor an extraordinary American whose brave actions averted a massive national security crisis." My father stood near the front, casually adjusting his jacket, completely unaware. "Earlier this week," the president continued, "a complex cyber-intelligence threat targeted our national infrastructure. While the public remained unaware, one officer led a covert counter-operation that neutralized the danger before disaster struck." The camera cut to a side angle as a high-ranking military official stepped forward carrying a velvet box. "For distinguished gallantry and selfless service," the president announced, "it is my highest privilege to award the Presidential Commendation to Major Emily Carter." A full-screen graphic flashed across national television. There was my official military portrait. Sharp, unyielding, clad in a crisp dark dress uniform adorned with rows of service ribbons. Beneath my photo, bold gold text read, "Major Emily Carter, Chief Intelligence Officer, Pentagon." Gasps erupted through the country club. My father's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color as if he'd just seen a ghost. Chloe covered her mouth in absolute shock. The Sterling family, the powerful, elite in-laws my father had spent months trying to impress, turned slowly toward him, their eyes wide with disbelief. The failed, jobless daughter Richard Carter had spent 8 years hiding. The girl he had just banished to the parking lot like trash was currently being awarded one of the highest military honors in the United States on live national television. The country club ballroom descended into complete chaos. The Sterlings, the powerful, old-money real estate dynasty my father had been groveling to all evening, immediately turned on him. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, his eyes locked on the television screen, then glared down at my father with cold disgust. "Richard," Mr. Sterling demanded, his voice slicing through the whispers in the room, "you told us your eldest daughter was an unemployed wanderer living off handouts. You said she was an embarrassment to your family name. Is that Major Emily Carter standing next to the President of the United States?" My father stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He couldn't speak. He couldn't lie his way out of this. The entire room of high society elites was watching him crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. Suddenly, my phone on the passenger seat of my car began to buzz aggressively. I pulled over onto the shoulder of the dark highway and looked at the screen. It was Chloe. When I pressed answer, the sound of hysterics filled my car. "Emily!" Chloe cried out, her voice shaking so violently she could barely breathe. Where are you? Oh my God, Emily, please tell me you're still near the club. I'm on the highway, Chloe, I said calmly. What's going on? Dad saw the broadcast, she sobbed. The Sterlings saw it. Dad is completely losing his mind. He's begging you to come back. He wants to introduce you to everyone. How could you keep this from us? How could you do this to our family? I listened to her panic, feeling a strange, quiet clarity wash over me. He didn't want his daughter back because he loved me. He wanted Major Carter back to save his ruined reputation. Before I could reply to Chloe, the line went dead. A second later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I hit speaker and set the phone down. Hello, Dad. Emily! His voice was frantic, stripped of all its usual polished control. Where are you? Turn the car around right now. You need to come back to the party immediately. Mr. Sterling wants to meet you. Everyone is waiting. I kept my eyes on the road, my voice steady and quiet. Why would I come back, Dad? You told me I didn't fit the image. There was a sharp gasp on his end, followed by the muffled sound of him stepping into a quiet hallway away from the crowd. Emily, be reasonable. That was just a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect your privacy. I didn't know. You never told me you were a major? You never asked, I replied sharply. For 8 years, you told everyone I was a failure because I didn't take your corporate money. You locked me out of my own sister's engagement tonight because you were ashamed of me. Emily, please! He was actually begging now, a sound I had never heard in my entire life. If you don't come back and stand by my side, the Sterlings are going to pull out of our business deal. My reputation will be destroyed. Your reputation isn't my responsibility, I said, feeling the final lingering weight of his approval lift off my shoulders forever. You built your life on lies and status, Dad. I built mine on service and honor. Enjoy your party. I hung up before he could answer, blocking his number for the rest of the drive. By the time I pulled up to my living quarters near the Pentagon, the story had already gone viral. The Sterlings ultimately canceled the joint business venture with my father, realizing his entire public persona was built on vanity and deceit. Chloe stayed with her fiancé, but their grand wedding was scaled down significantly after my father's real character was laid bare before their high society circle. He tried reaching out through mutual relatives, sending emails filled with excuses, but I never responded. I didn't need revenge. His own pride had done more damage than I ever could. 2 days later, I attended my official military honors dinner. I sat at a table surrounded by real family, my fellow officers, people who knew my true worth, my sacrifice, and my character, regardless of titles or money. Standing up for yourself against your own family is never easy, but walking away from people who only value you as a trophy is the greatest freedom you will ever experience. Now, I'm curious about you, who listened to my story. Did I do the right thing by walking away and refusing to save my father's reputation? What would you have done if you received that text message outside the gate? Comment your thoughts below, and let me know which city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching, and stay true to who you are.